My name's Carl Campbell. My granddad was in St. Luke's for, I think, about 10 days. The original photograph was me giving him a shave. I didn't even know it was taken. My mum actually took it when I wasn't looking. It was giving him that sense of dignity and making him feel like he was himself. Because when you're in that situation where you are sat, you're not really doing much, and he knew that his life was coming to an end, he didn't really feel himself, and it was just giving that bit of normality back. And an everyday thing like having a shave is just, it's, you know what I mean, it makes you feel yourself, feel like at home. And it's these sorts of things that you kind of remember, and it was him asking me to do it, and I knew he couldn't do it for himself, so it felt a lot for me. It's like a big responsibility for me to help take over, because Jamaicans, he's a Jamaican man, and Jamaicans do tend to be quite proud people, and to ask for anybody to do anything for them is a really big step. And for my granddad, it was such a big step to ask for help, because he never really asked for help, and even when he was at his most ill, and he had visitors asking how far he could walk and how much he could do for himself and if he could feed himself, he was still giving the answers that he could when he couldn't. So that last bit of dignity he had was him asking me for help, and that meant a lot to me. When he could, I used to get the occasional text or phone call where he'd be asking me to go to the shop and fetch him ice cream. So I got that quite a lot. Or you promised me ice cream yesterday. Why aren't you here? I bought him some Haagen Dazs once, and he kept calling it the good one. Bring that good ice cream. My granddad actually, he had a lot of kids. At the start, he had 8 kids, so there was always quite a large amount of people visiting him, which was great for him. I'm sure for other people on the ward, it was a bit distracting because you forever got people coming through the door. But he was never on his own, and I think that's one of the things that he loved. Is the one thing that he always said that he was scared about in terms of passing away was not being able to look after his family. So for us, being in that situation where we could spend the last moments with him was just the best. I think especially with like males and grandfathers, they can't let go, because the whole life they've been the protector, and especially coming from, I think it was the 50s and 60s and the Windrush, where my granddad came over from Jamaica. Even when he came over and he was sending money back to look after me nan, he was still that main primary carer, even though he was so far away, and he kind of never let that go. So when it did come to him being ill, he was still wondering, oh, have you eaten? Here's some money. You go and get some food. You make sure that you're okay. Oh, you've not slept. You sleep. I'll be fine. And it was he couldn't let that part of him go. My dad wasn't around much like growing up. My granddad was more like a dad to me. So when it came to learning how to shave, or getting advice about girls at school, or wondering what car to buy, or if a car needed mending or anything, we always went to Grandad. Or if you go on a date and you needed a haircut, you went to Grandad, and he was sort of the protector and the dad to us all. There was so many of us grandkids that grew up without fathers, and he was there for all of us. Once I split up with one of my exes, and I remember I was totally distraught, and I went round and I'd not been eating, and his granddad, I'm so upset, and he just said to me, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice. Is you're a child, then you're an adult, and then you're a parent. And then he proceeded to drink his rum, and that was the end of the story. Me auntie spent, I think it's a good 500, 600 quid on a brand new table for his dining room. And the next time she saw him, he'd taken a table apart piece by piece and arranged it into a bed. And it was now his new bed. But that was Grandad. It was a big thing for him coming across in the 60s from Jamaica, and being a black man in England. It was a lot back in them times, because he wasn't necessarily liked all the time, and it wasn't an easy ride. But he did it because he knew that was the best thing for his family. And part of the legacy I mentioned before is the fact that he's left me with the skills now to grow up in this country where I've been to university. My mum's been to university. My brother's been to university, and being in Jamaica, these are things that necessarily might not have happened. So that decision that he made is still affecting our lives today, and it will continue to. I went to Jamaica last summer for the first time. My cousins in Jamaica, and obviously my granddad's sister and stuff, and they were telling me stories, and they took me around sort of the village in Spring Garden where we grew up, not too far from the grill. It was for me, growing up in England, I've kind of, it's like a dual sort of heritage thing where I've never felt like this is home, but it's not always where I belong. And being in Jamaica, it was people telling stories of, oh, you, this is the church where your granddad used to ring the church bell where he was when he was 5 years old. This is the school that he went to. This is where he used to sneak around to the next village to go and see your nan. And everything, it explained to me who he was, and how he developed into the person that he was, as well as for me seeing this is where home comes from. The last day that I spent in Jamaica, I burst into tears because everything just made sense. I kind of always had the beginning of the story missing in terms to myself and my granddad and that part of identity. And coming back and speaking to him about it all and telling him about how I met his sister, and it all kind of like came to fruition. It all made sense for me. I know, especially in regards to males and mental health, it's hard to open up sometimes. And whoever it was in the family or friends, you could always go around to Grandad, and he'd put the kettle on. And even sometimes he wouldn't necessarily just give advice, but you could just talk. And sometimes it's just nice to talk because whatever's bothering you comes out, and once it's a load off of you, you feel like it's shared. It's difficult because there's times that sometimes you do feel like you want to open up, and you realise that he's not there to go and open up to. But I know that he wouldn't have left us all in his position if he didn't feel like he could, and it would be okay. My granddad's moved on, and you kind of feel like you've got to move on yourself, but grief kind of holds you in that state sometimes. And I kind of feel that as time's gone on, I've kind of learned to deal with the fact that granddad's not there, but he's always going to be part of me in my memories. And when I do have children, there's stories that I can tell them about granddad, and who he was and what he was like, and those things they just stay with you. These are things that I'm never gonna forget, and they'll never leave me. You can forever learn more about somebody even when they're gone. The hardest thing to accept is that everything had moved on, and even though I was still in that state of grief where I kind of missed him, the world doesn't really stop for you, and people's everyday struggles kind of continue, and other people get sick, and it kind of reaffirmed to me that I have to be strong enough to carry on. And I'm glad that I did come back because it taught me a lot about myself in regards to grief. With my granddad being unwell, I think partly due to he knew that it was going to pass. It wasn't that feeling of, oh my God, he's gone. It was, he's not in pain anymore. And I remember seeing him for the first time after he passed, and he looked peaceful. There wasn't the pain, and he wasn't struggling to breathe. And he looked more like my granddad after he'd passed than he ever did when he was unwell. He was the sort of person that he wouldn't want us being upset and crying and stuff. The one thing he asked and requested from the whole family for his funeral is, I don't want you to be upset, I just want a big party. So I kind of felt guilty not respecting his wishes by being upset. And that's part of the reason why I didn't want to show anybody that I was. Growing up, he was the only person when I was a child that could stop me from crying. He was the only person, and he had this big jukebox in the corner of his room, and he used to go and put a reggae album on, and he'd sort of pick me up, and he'd sort of shake me a bit, and then I'd stop crying. And it's like his sort of special skill. He was always that person, and I think because he was always there from when I was young, I always had that trust with him. He always got involved with all like sort of stuff with the kids. So whether it was giving us haircuts and looking after us in that sort of way, or giving us baths when we were younger, he was always the person to do that. Like I said, he was always the carer from the start, and for me to look after him was sort of the story coming full circle.